The bottom line: Alabama rapper HoneyKomb Brazy just walked out of federal prison for the second time in 5 years. But his October 2025 release might be even more fragile than the last, with a history of parole violations, murdered family members, and an inability to escape the streets that raised him. The question isn't if he'll go back, it's when. October 2025. A white van pulls up outside a federal facility, and Nashon Jones steps into the sunlight as a free man. Cameras are rolling, friends are screaming, and someone's holding a cake with his face on it. This is HoneyKomb Brazy's second chance at freedom, his second opportunity to prove that music can save him. But if you know anything about Brazy's story, you know second chances don't last long when you're from Mobile, Alabama, and the streets haven't forgotten your name. The celebration looks like any other rapper's homecoming. There's laughter, there's relief, there's hope that maybe this time will be different. But Brazy just served 30 months on federal weapons charges, and the conditions of his release are stricter than ever. No guns, no associating with known criminals, stay out of trouble. Simple rules that most people could follow without thinking twice. For Brazy, they might as well be asking him to stop breathing, because the life he's lived, the enemies he's made, and the losses he's suffered have created a situation where staying legal means staying vulnerable. And staying vulnerable in his world means staying alive becomes a gamble. But understanding why freedom feels more like a countdown than a celebration means going back to where it all started. Back to the streets of Mobile that shaped him into exactly who he is today. Mobile, Alabama isn't the kind of place that makes the news for good reasons. It's a port city with deep poverty, deeper violence, and neighborhoods where making it to 25 feels like an accomplishment. Brazy was born Nashon Jones in 1995, but his parents weren't around to raise him. Both of them were too busy cycling in and out of jail themselves, leaving their son in the care of his paternal grandparents. Tony and Layla Lewis didn't just take him in, they became his entire world. The only stability in a childhood that was anything but stable. By age 10, Brazy was already getting arrested. Breaking into warehouses, stealing cars, running with the wrong crowd because in his neighborhood, there wasn't really a right crowd to run with. School wasn't working out. He dropped out in 8th grade, and without education or guidance, the streets became his classroom. The lessons he learned there would follow him for the rest of his life. Survival, loyalty, the code that says you handle your own problems and you never let anyone disrespect you without consequences. Music was the only thing that made sense, the only outlet that didn't end in handcuffs or hospital visits. Brazy started writing and recording in his teens, influenced by Southern rap legends who told stories about the same life he was living. His lyrics weren't fantasies or exaggerations, they were documentaries, raw, unfiltered accounts of a world most people only see on the news, and people started paying attention. 2018 changed everything. Brazy dropped a freestyle that went viral, spreading beyond Mobile and put Alabama rap on the map in ways it hadn't been before. His delivery was aggressive, his storytelling was vivid, and his authenticity was undeniable. You could tell he wasn't playing a character. This was his life, and he was letting everyone witness it in real time. The views kept climbing, the followers kept growing, and before long the industry came calling. James Prince, the legendary CEO of Rap-A-Lot Records, signed Brazy in 2020. This was the big break. Rap-A-Lot had launched careers, created stars, and given Southern artists a platform when nobody else would. For Brazy, this meant collaborations with established names, bigger budgets for music videos, and a chance to turn his story into something that could actually change his life. Tracks like That's the Intro and 6 O'Clock racked up millions of streams. He was building something real, something that could pull him out of the cycle that had trapped his parents. But success in the rap game doesn't erase your past. It just makes your past more visible. And Brazy's past was coming for him with a vengeance. In 2020, Brazy caught a 15-year sentence for weapons possession. The details were messy, guns that may or may not have been his, circumstances that looked bad no matter how his lawyer spun them. He went in thinking he'd serve most of that decade behind bars, watching his career crumble while other artists took his spot. But after 18 months, something unexpected happened. He won an appeal and walked out on parole in late 2020, free, but on a leash so tight it was choking him before he even realized it. The conditions were clear. Stay in Alabama. Don't miss check-ins with your probation officer. Don't be around weapons or known felons. For most people, these would be annoying but manageable restrictions. For Brazy, they were nearly impossible. His whole circle consisted of people with records. His neighborhood was full of weapons because his neighborhood was full of danger. And staying in Alabama meant staying in Mobile, where people who wanted him gone knew exactly where to find him. He tried. He really did try. But in February 2021, trying stopped mattering. The call came in the middle of the night. There was a fire at his grandparents' house. The same grandparents who raised him when nobody else would. The same people who believed in him when everyone else wrote him off. By the time firefighters controlled the blaze, Tony and Layla Lewis were gone. The initial reports called it a tragic accident, an electrical fire that spread too fast. But Brazy knew better, and when the investigation revealed the truth, it confirmed his worst fears. They'd been shot multiple times before the fire even started. This wasn't an accident. This was a hit. This was retaliation for beefers he had been involved in, for disrespect he'd shown, for the life he'd lived that painted targets on everyone he loved. 4 men were eventually arrested and charged with the murders. The police said it was connected to street politics, to gang disputes that had been simmering for years. But knowing who did it didn't bring them back. Knowing why didn't make it hurt any less. Brazy's music changed after that. The pain in his voice became sharper, more desperate. Songs like Letter to God weren't just tracks, they were therapy sessions recorded over beats. He was processing trauma in real time and his fans could hear him breaking. But grief wasn't the only thing he was dealing with. Fear was eating him alive too. Because if they could get to his grandparents, they could get to anyone. His mother's house got shot months later. He was walking around with a target on his back, and the law said he couldn't do anything to protect himself. No guns, no security who carried weapons. Just hope that the same people who murdered his family in cold blood would suddenly develop a conscience. So Brazy did what anyone in his position would do. He broke the rules to stay alive. He moved to Texas, trying to put distance between himself and Mobile. He requested to transfer his probation, but the state denied it. So he stayed anyway, figuring survival was more important than paperwork. He missed check-ins with his probation officer because showing up meant going back to Alabama, and going back to Alabama meant walking into enemy territory unarmed. His lawyer would later argue that Brazy was living in fear for his life, that the violations weren't criminal, they were desperate attempts at self-preservation. The prosecution didn't care. To them, rules were rules, and Brazy had broken every single one. Evidence started piling up. Social media posts showing him in Georgia and Texas when he should have been in Alabama. Music videos with what prosecutors claimed were real weapons, despite his team insisting they were props with receipts to prove it. Footage from a shootout that almost took his life. Grainy video that showed someone who looked like Brazy firing back at people trying to kill him. His habit of documenting everything online, of keeping it real for his fans, became the prosecution's greatest weapon. They had him. And they knew it. But before they could move on to parole violations, Brazy caught a fresh case that sealed his fate. December 18, 2023. A routine traffic stop that turned into a federal weapons charge. Brazy was in a vehicle with 2 other men, both of whom were also convicted felons. The driver was wearing tactical gear. There were 2 guns in the car, a 9mm under the driver's seat and an AR pistol in the 3rd row. Nobody claimed ownership, but ownership didn't matter. Federal law says if you're a felon and you're in proximity to a weapon, even if it's not yours, even if you're not touching it, you're guilty of possession. Brazy's lawyer tried to explain the context. His client needed security. His family had been murdered. There were active threats against his life. The people protecting him were hired by third parties and weren't supposed to have weapons either, but they did because without them, Brazy wouldn't survive a week. The court listened. They acknowledged the tragedy he'd suffered. They recognized that he'd been targeted, that his fear was legitimate. And then they sentenced him anyway. 30 months in federal prison. Not as bad as it could have been, but bad enough. February 2025, Brazy stood in court and said he wanted to be a great man but didn't know how. He wanted to do right. His lawyer emphasized that this wasn't about criminality, it was about survival in a world that wouldn't let him escape his past. The judge handed down the sentence, and Brazy went back to the same system he just left. For 30 months, he disappeared from the streets. His music kept dropping. Songs recorded before his arrest that reminded fans he was still out there, still fighting. but the momentum he built was slipping away. Other artists were taking his shine. The rap game doesn't wait for anyone, especially not someone locked up with an uncertain release date. And then October 2025 arrived. The white van, the cameras, the freedom. Brazy stepped out looking different. Older, harder, more aware of how fragile his situation really is. The celebration was loud, but underneath the noise was a question everyone was thinking but nobody wanted to ask out loud. How long will this last? Because Brazy's track record doesn't inspire confidence. His first release lasted barely a year before parole violations sent him back. The threats that justified his weapons charges haven't disappeared. The enemies who killed his grandparents are still out there, and some of them are still free. His lawyer said he needed security, but security with weapons means federal charges. Security without weapons means he's unsecured. It's a trap with no exit. A situation designed to fail no matter what choice he makes. Stay legal and risk dying, or break the rules and risk going back to prison. For Brazy, freedom isn't freedom at all. It's just a different kind of cage. Since his release, he's been back on Instagram going live, connecting with fans, talking about new music and fresh starts. But anyone who's followed his story knows how this usually ends. The streets don't forget, beef doesn't expire, and the system that keeps catching him isn't designed to help people like him succeed. It's designed to keep them cycling through until they either die or disappear forever. So what happens next for HoneyKomb Brazy? Does he finally find a way to break the cycle, to turn his music into the lifeline that pulls him out for good? Or does he become another statistic, another talented artist who couldn't escape the environment that made him? The answer probably depends on whether he can do something nobody in his position has managed yet. Survive in a world that keeps trying to kill him without breaking the laws that say he can't protect himself. Right now, Brazy's free. But freedom without safety is just borrowed time. And in Mobile, Alabama, time always runs out eventually.